My girlfriend whispered I should call my dad before answering. He will decide if we can stay together. When I asked what she wanted from us, she asks her father's permission for literally everything. I am starting to feel like I am dating him instead of her. I have been dating Evelyn for about 10 months now, and I am honestly not sure if what I am experiencing is normal or if I am going crazy. She is beautiful, sweet, and comes from a good family, but there is something that has been bothering me more and more. She asks her father's permission for absolutely everything, and I mean everything. When I first started dating her, I actually thought this was kind of endearing. She seemed really close to her family, especially her dad, Harold, and I interpreted it as her being respectful and well-raised. Coming from a more independent family dynamic, I found it refreshing that she valued her parents' opinions so much. But it has gotten to the point where I feel like I am in a relationship with her father, not her. Here are some examples from just this past month that really opened my eyes to how deep this goes. Last week, we were at a restaurant and she couldn't decide between 2 entrees. Instead of just picking one or asking me what I thought, she actually called her dad right there at the table to ask which one he thought she should order. I sat there watching her describe menu items to him over the phone while our server waited awkwardly. Then there was the time she wanted to get her hair cut before making the appointment. She spent an hour taking photos of different hairstyles she found online and sending them to her dad to get his approval on which one would look best on her. When we were planning a weekend trip together, she called him to ask if he thought it was a good idea for us to go away together, even though we have been together for almost a year. The most recent example happened just last week when she was offered a job at a marketing firm. Good pay, great benefits, exactly in her field. But instead of discussing it with me or just making the decision herself, her first instinct was to call Daddy and ask if he thought she should take it. The thing is, Harold isn't some controlling monster from what I can tell. He seems like a decent guy, successful businessman, clearly loves his daughter, but he also clearly enjoys being consulted on every single decision she makes, no matter how small. What is really starting to bug me is that Evelyn doesn't seem to have any opinions of her own. Whenever I ask her what she wants to do, where she wants to go, what she thinks about something, her default response is I don't know. What do you think? Or I should probably ask my dad what he thinks first. I tried bringing this up with her gently a few weeks ago. I said something like, you don't always have to check with your parents about everything. You are an adult. You can make your own decisions. Her response was to get defensive and say that she values her family's input and that I should respect that. She said her dad has a lot of life experience and gives good advice. So why wouldn't she want his guidance? I tried to explain that there is a difference between asking for advice occasionally and asking permission for every little thing, but she didn't seem to understand the distinction. The breaking point for me was last weekend. We were having a disagreement about something minor. I cannot even remember what it was about. And right in the middle of our conversation, she pulled out her phone and said, I am going to call my dad and see what he thinks about this. I just stared at her. We were having a conversation between the two of us about our relationship, and her instinct was to bring her father into it. I asked her to please not call him, that this was something we should work out between ourselves. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable and said, but he always knows what to say to make things better. That is when it hit me. I don't think Evelyn has ever made a significant decision on her own in her entire life. Every choice, every opinion, every preference. It all comes from Harold. I love her, or at least I think I do. But I am starting to realize that I don't actually know who she is as a person. Everything I think I know about her, her favorite foods, her career goals, her hobbies, her opinions on things, might just be reflections of what her father thinks she should like or do. Is this normal? Are there other guys out there dating girls who cannot make a decision without daddy's approval? Because I am starting to feel like I am in some kind of weird three-way relationship where Harold is calling all the shots and I am just along for the ride. I care about Evelyn, but I don't know how to be with someone who doesn't seem to exist as an independent person. And I definitely don't want to spend the rest of my life having to get Harold's approval for every aspect of our relationship. Am I overreacting? Is this just what it is like to date someone from a close-knit family? Or is this as weird as it feels to me? Edit. A lot of people are asking about specific examples. Here is one that really stuck with me. Last month we were at Target, and she wanted to buy new bed sheets. She spent 20 minutes on the phone with her dad asking him what thread count he thought was best and what color would go with her room for bedsheets. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. The responses were pretty unanimous that this situation is not normal, and reading your comments helped me realize I needed to have a serious conversation with Evelyn about this. I asked her to meet me for coffee yesterday so we could talk about some things that had been bothering me. I went into it hoping she would be receptive and maybe we could work through this together. I was wrong. I started by telling her that I loved her and wanted our relationship to work, but that I was concerned about how much she relied on her father's input for every decision. I tried to be gentle about it, explaining that while I respected her family relationships, I felt like we couldn't move forward as a couple if she couldn't make decisions independently. Her immediate response was to get defensive. There is nothing wrong with valuing your family's opinion, Adrian. Some of us actually care what our parents think. I tried to explain that there is a difference between valuing someone's opinion and being unable to function without their constant approval. I gave her some examples of recent situations where she had called her dad instead of just making a simple decision herself. That is when she said something that made my blood run cold. My dad has been making good decisions his whole life. Why would I not want his guidance? He knows what is best for me. But what about what you think is best for you? I asked. She looked genuinely confused by the question, like it had never occurred to her that she might know what was best for herself. I decided to try a different approach. I asked her to tell me about a time when she disagreed with her father about something and made her own choice anyway. She sat there for a long time thinking, then finally said, "Well, there was this one time in high school when he wanted me to take advanced math and I wanted to take art instead. What did you do?" I asked, hoping finally for an example of independence. I took advanced math. He was right. It looked better on my college applications. I was stunned. But what about what you wanted? I wanted what was best for my future, she said, like she was reciting something she had been taught. That is when I realized the depth of the problem. This wasn't just about asking for advice. Evelyn had been so conditioned to defer to her father's judgment that she had never developed her own decision-making skills or even her own sense of what she wanted. I tried one more time. Evelyn, what do you want from our relationship? Not what your dad thinks. Not what you think I want to hear. But what do you actually want? She stared at me for a moment, then pulled out her phone. I should call my dad and ask him what he thinks about that question. I lost it. Do you hear yourself right now? I am asking you what you want, and your response is to call your father. When do you make decisions for yourself? When do you have your own thoughts and feelings? She looked hurt and confused. I don't understand why you are being so mean about this. My dad gives good advice. This isn't about advice, Evelyn. This is about the fact that I feel like I am dating your father instead of you. Every opinion you have, every decision you make, every preference you express, it all comes from him. Where are you in this relationship? She started crying then, which made me feel terrible. But I pressed on because I felt like this might be my only chance to get through to her. I love you, but I need to know that you exist as your own person. I need to know that when you tell me you like something or want something, it is because you actually like or want it, not because your dad told you that you should. Through her tears, she said, I don't know how to do that. I have always just done what he thought was best. That broke my heart. This beautiful, intelligent woman had been so sheltered and controlled that she didn't even know who she was outside of her father's expectations. I suggested that maybe she should try making some decisions on her own, starting with small things, just to see what it felt like to trust her own judgment. She looked terrified by the idea. But what if I make the wrong choice? Then you learn from it and make a better choice next time. That is how adults grow and develop. She was quiet for a long time, then said, I need to think about this. What are you going to do? I asked. Without any trace of irony, she said, I am going to talk to my dad about it and see what he thinks I should do. I just stared at her. Even when confronted with the problem directly, her instinct was still to run to Daddy for guidance. I told her that I needed some space to figure out if this relationship was going to work. She asked if I was breaking up with her, and I said I wasn't sure yet, but that things needed to change if we were going to have a future together. As I was leaving, she called after me. Should I not call my dad about this? I turned around and said, Evelyn, the fact that you are asking me whether you should call your dad proves that you don't understand what I am trying to tell you. I have been thinking about this for the past few days, and I am honestly not sure there is a way forward. How do you have a relationship with someone who doesn't know who they are? How do you love someone who has never learned to have her own thoughts and feelings? I feel terrible because I can see that she is genuinely confused and hurt. And none of this is really her fault. She has been conditioned her entire life to be this way. But I also cannot spend my life waiting for her to develop into an independent person, especially when she doesn't seem to understand why that is even necessary. Edit. A lot of people are asking if I think Harold deliberately raised her this way. I honestly don't know. It could be controlling behavior, or it could just be an overprotective parent who never learned to let go. Either way, the result is the same. Update 2. I wasn't planning to update again, but the situation has developed in ways that are both heartbreaking and almost comically absurd. So I figured you guys who have been following this story might want to know how it turned out. After my last post, I spent about a week really thinking about whether this relationship could be salvaged. I kept going back and forth. On one hand, I genuinely cared about Evelyn and could see that her dependency issues weren't really her fault. On the other hand, I was 24 years old and didn't want to spend the best years of my life trying to teach a grown woman how to have her own opinions. The decision was made for me when Evelyn called me last Monday. Adrian, I have been thinking about what you said, and I want to work on this, she began. And for a moment, I felt hopeful. I talked to my dad about it, and he agrees that I should try to be more independent in our relationship. My heart sank. Even her decision to become more independent was made in consultation with Harold Evelyn. I said, "Do you not see the irony in what you just said?" "What do you mean?" "You talked to your dad about becoming more independent from your dad." There was a long pause, but he gave really good advice about how to do it. That is when I realized this was never going to change. She was so deep in this pattern that she couldn't even see it when it was pointed out to her directly. I told her that I thought we should break up. She immediately started crying and asking what she could do to fix things. "I can change. Adrian, just tell me what you want me to do and I will do it." That is exactly the problem. Evelyn, you want me to tell you what to do instead of figuring it out for yourself. You want to follow my instructions the same way you follow your dad's instructions. She didn't understand. I don't think she was capable of understanding. I told her I was sorry, that I cared about her deeply, but that I couldn't be in a relationship with someone who didn't exist as an independent person. I wished her well and said goodbye. She called me back 3 hours later to tell me she had talked to her dad about our breakup, and he wanted to speak with me directly to work things out. I declined and asked her not to contact me anymore. But here is where it gets weird. Harold started contacting me directly. He called my phone twice. I didn't answer, and then sent me a long email explaining that Evelyn was heartbroken, and that he thought we were good together. He said he had been talking to her about being more decisive, and that he was sure she could change if I just gave her another chance. The complete lack of self-awareness was staggering. He was trying to convince me to get back together with his daughter by making decisions for her about how she should change to win me back. When I didn't respond to his email, he somehow got my work number and called me there. My coworker answered and said there was a Mr. Caraway on the line who said it was about a family matter. Against my better judgment, I took the call. Harold basically offered to coach Evelyn through becoming more independent. He said he understood my concerns, and that he would help her learn to make decisions on her own, with his guidance. "Mr. Caraway," I said, "you are offering to help your daughter become independent by continuing to guide all her decisions. Do you see the contradiction there?" He got defensive and said he was just trying to help his daughter be happy. I told him that the best thing he could do for Evelyn would be to step back and let her figure things out for herself, but that ultimately, it wasn't my problem anymore. He actually got angry at that point and said I was being unreasonable, and that Evelyn was a good girl who deserved better than to be abandoned over something so trivial. I ended the call and blocked both of their numbers, but the story doesn't end there. Through mutual friends, I have heard about what has been happening with Evelyn since our breakup. And honestly, it is both sad and infuriating. Apparently, Harold decided that the problem wasn't Evelyn's lack of independence. It was that I wasn't the right guy for her. So he has been setting up dates for her with sons of his business associates and friends. According to my friend Sarah, who is still in touch with Evelyn, she has been on about 6 or 7 dates in the past 2 weeks. But here is the kicker. Harold has been interviewing these guys beforehand to make sure they meet his standards, and Evelyn goes along with whoever he approves of, Sarah said. Evelyn seems miserable and keeps talking about how she wishes she could get back together with me, but that her dad says I was bad for her because I tried to turn her against her family. The most ridiculous part is that apparently none of these dates are going well because Harold's standards are impossible to meet. According to Sarah, he has rejected guys for being not ambitious enough, too ambitious, not family-oriented enough, and too focused on family at the expense of career. One guy got eliminated because Harold didn't like his handshake. Another one was rejected because he drove a Honda instead of a more respectable car brand. Sarah said that Evelyn has started asking Harold before each date what she should wear, what she should order, what topics she should talk about, and how she should present herself. She is basically going on dates as a completely manufactured version of herself designed to appeal to whatever Harold thinks each guy wants. Needless to say, none of these guys are calling for second dates. Turns out most people can tell when they are dating someone who has no personality of their own. The saddest part is that Sarah said Evelyn asked her if she thought there was something wrong with her because none of these nice men seem to want to see her again. Sarah, who is more diplomatic than I would be, apparently told her that maybe she should focus on figuring out who she is and what she wants before trying to date anyone else. Evelyn's response was to ask if Sarah thought she should talk to her dad about taking a break from dating. I feel terrible for Evelyn. I really do. She is trapped in this cycle and doesn't even know it. But I also feel validated in my decision to leave. This isn't something that was going to get better with time or patience. This is a fundamental issue with how she was raised and how she sees herself in relation to others. I have started dating someone new, a woman named Claire who has strong opinions about everything and isn't afraid to disagree with me when she thinks I am wrong. The contrast is striking. I didn't realize how exhausting it was to be in a relationship with someone who couldn't make decisions until I was with someone who could. Final update. I really wasn't planning to update this situation again. I have moved on. I am happy with Claire, and I honestly thought the Evelyn chapter of my life was closed. But something happened last week that I feel compelled to share, partly because it perfectly encapsulates everything that was wrong with that relationship, and partly because I think it might help other people who are dealing with similar situations. Last Tuesday, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Evelyn, texting from what I assume was a new phone since I had blocked her original number. The text said, "Hi, Adrian, this is Evelyn. I know you asked me not to contact you, but I have been working on myself like you suggested, and I think I am ready to try again. Can we meet for coffee to talk?" I almost didn't respond, but something about the wording made me curious. The phrase "working on myself like you suggested" felt very coached. Like someone had told her that is what she should say to get my attention. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. I guess part of me was hoping that maybe she would actually made some progress, or at least gain some insight into the problems we had had. We met at the same coffee shop where I had tried to explain the issues with her dependency 6 weeks earlier. She looked good. She had done something different with her hair and was wearing a style of dress I had never seen her in before. She started by telling me about all the work she had been doing on herself. She had been reading self-help books about independence and confidence. She had been practicing making small decisions without asking her father's input. She had even started seeing a therapist to work through her relationship patterns. I was cautiously optimistic until I started asking for specifics. "What kind of small decisions have you been practicing?" I asked. "Well, last week I decided what to have for lunch without calling anyone for advice," she said proudly. "That is good," I said, though internally, I was struck by how sad it was that a 22-year-old woman was proud of choosing her own lunch. "What else?" "I picked out this dress myself," she said, gesturing to her outfit. "Usually I send pictures to my dad first, but this time I just bought it." "How did that feel?" I asked. "Scary," she admitted, "but the saleslady said it looked nice, so I think I made the right choice." I noticed that she had still sought approval for the decision, just from a stranger instead of her father. But I decided to focus on the positive. "What about bigger decisions? The self-help books you mentioned, what made you choose those?" "My therapist recommended them. She said they would help me understand why I have trouble making decisions." "And what did you learn from reading them?" She looked thoughtful for a moment. I learned that I need to trust myself more and not rely so heavily on other people's opinions. That is great, I said, feeling a spark of hope. So what does that look like in practice? Well, I have been asking my therapist what she thinks I should do instead of asking my dad. My heart sank. She hadn't learned to make independent decisions. She had just transferred her dependency from her father to her therapist. I decided to test this theory. Evelyn, what do you think about us potentially getting back together? Not what your therapist thinks, not what your dad thinks, but what do you actually want? She was quiet for a long time, clearly struggling with the question. Finally, she said, I think you were good for me. You challenged me to grow. But do you want to be with me? Do you miss me? Do you love me? Another long pause. I think I do. But I wanted to get your opinion first before I decided for sure. I stared at her. Evelyn, you are asking me to tell you whether or not you have feelings for me. She looked confused. I just want to make sure I am thinking about this the right way. That is when I realized that nothing had fundamentally changed. She was still looking for someone else to tell her what to think and feel. She had just expanded her roster of decision-makers to include her therapist and potentially me again. I asked her one more question. If I told you right now that I think we should get back together, would you agree? Yes, she said immediately. And if I told you that I think we shouldn't get back together, what would you do? I would probably ask my therapist what she thinks I should do next. I stood up to leave. Evelyn, you are still doing it. You are still asking other people to make your decisions for you. The only difference is that now you have more people to ask. She looked panicked, but I am trying. I really am working on this. I know you are, and I am proud of you for making the effort. But you cannot work on becoming independent by following someone else's instructions on how to be independent. That is not how it works. She started crying. I don't know how to do this. Adrian, I don't know how to just know what I want. My heart broke for her a little bit. I know you don't. But that is something you have to figure out on your own. No one can teach you how to have your own opinions and feelings. So there is no chance for us, she asked. I was tempted to just say no and walk away, but I decided to give her one more piece of honesty. Evelyn, the fact that you are asking me that question tells me you are not ready for a relationship with anyone. You are asking me to decide whether or not we should be together. That is not my decision to make. It should be yours. I am scared to make the wrong choice, she whispered. Then you are not ready to make any choices. And until you are not ready to be with someone who needs a partner, not a project. I left her sitting there and walked away. It was one of the hardest things I have ever done because I could see how lost and scared she was. But I also knew that me staying and trying to help her would only make the problem worse. I heard through Sarah that Evelyn told her therapist about our meeting, and the therapist supposedly told her that she needs to spend some time single and focus on developing her own identity before trying to date anyone else. I hope she follows that advice. I hope she eventually learns to trust her own judgment and develops into the independent person she has the potential to be. But I also know that I made the right choice in walking away. You cannot love someone into becoming a whole person. They have to do that work themselves. I am happy with Claire. She disagrees with me about things. She makes her own decisions. She has strong opinions about everything from politics to pizza toppings. Sometimes her independence is frustrating when I want her to just go along with what I want to do. But mostly it is refreshing and attractive, and it makes me feel like I am in a relationship with an actual person, not a reflection of someone else's expectations. I hope Evelyn finds herself someday, but I am glad I didn't stick around waiting for that to happen.